Hi, everybody. Kai Hutchins from Massive Corporation here. So, recently I had an interview with two students up in Saskatoon that I wanted to share with you. So, they were doing a school report on video games and video game history. They just found Massive Corporation with an online search as being one of the few video game companies in Saskatchewan. So, they reached out for an interview, and I was happy to give it. So, they asked some really great questions. I thought some of the answers might be interesting for the rest of you. Hopefully, help some people out, get some insights on the industry. Um, we're very happy to do the interview. Outreach like this is really a big part of Massive Corporation's mandate. We're here to try and help grow the industry in Saskatchewan. We love doing that. However, we can help whether it's reaching out to students like this or holding workshops or grants like Massive Sacks of Cash. We're trying to do whatever we can to help build the industry here in Saskatchewan. So I thought this interview was particularly interesting. Thankfully, they agreed to share their recording with me, so we can enjoy it today. Apologies for a little bit of technical hiccups there. It dropped the call a couple times, and there are some audio issues with one of the mics, but I still think it's worth a listen to. So hopefully you enjoy. Thanks.
Okay, next question. Sorry. So what do you think makes your game development studio unique or different? Yeah.
Well, admittedly, there's not a lot of game studios in Saskatchewan right now. It's very much an industry that Saskatchewan hasn't really developed yet. But that's really, I think, one of Massive's unique positions is that we're trying to grow the industry in Saskatchewan. So we're not just doing our own game development projects, but we're actually actively involved in supporting the industry here. So one of the things we do is we've been running a grant called the Massive Sacks of Cash grant, where we actually funded someone else to help them make their video game dreams come true. So we're funding another game developer in Saskatchewan called Sam Ramsey, who's developing their own video game studio and products. And so we're not just focused on ourselves, but we're here to try and help the entire province have a brighter future in game development.
Okay. Thank you. The next question. What do you think attracts people to games in general?
Well, there's a lot of different things people can get from games. And I think that's probably one of the big misconceptions is everybody thinks it's just sort of mindless entertainment. But there's a lot of different reasons people play games. And this is true of physical games, sports, anything like that. There's a lot of personal reasons and personal meaning behind things. So, we might be considered an entertainment industry, but there's lots of benefits that you get besides just having fun. People socialize through games. They make friendships through games. You can also express your creativity through games. A lot of games can be modded or have tools in them to create things, and you can actually express yourself through them. You can also learn a lot of things through games, either ones that are specifically made for education or simply through the theming and the concepts presented in games. So I think really the beautiful thing about games is they can be many things to many different people. Even the same game can mean different things to different people. So the beauty of it is games are the most advanced form of media we've ever come up with. A book you can only read, a piece of visual art you can only see. movies may have, sound and visuals, but you can't change them. You can't interact with them. So video games, to me, are the most expressive and capable form of media. And I believe that they can be used to change society for the better. So
Nice.
lots of different.
Yeah. So I heard you focus on making retro style games. Can you tell us more about why you think these games are starting to get popular again?
Yeah, so I think one of the keys to retro games is that the simplicity of the art style. So, I've got Queen City Chaos behind me, sort of our flagship retro game. When you're using old school graphics like that, everything has to be shrunk down and simplified. And in a lot of ways, when we simplify art, we have to make it what we call more iconic. Each decision you make when you're making that art, it's here's this single concrete pixel. It has to be a certain color, and you only have a certain number of them, and you only have certain colors you can work with. You have to make very deliberate decisions when you're crafting something like that. And when you make something simpler, it's easier to remember, and it makes a stronger impact on people in a lot of ways. You can remember how things look. It's easy for people to sort of draw out an old Super Mario Brothers 1 mushroom because it is so simple. Whereas if you ask people to draw like a modern video game character, it's like, oh, they're super complex. I don't know. Like, try drawing the main character from Cyberpunk 2077. You're like, yikes, it's too complicated, right? So there's an interesting effect that when you simplify things and make them more iconic, you also make them easier to remember and more symbolic. So I think there's always going to be retro games simply because they can tap into that simplicity that our minds can wrap around easier and retain longer.
Cool.
Okay, so I read that your flagship game, right, Queen City Chaos, got chosen for second most anticipated game in Canada. In your opinion, what makes a game interest more people and make it successful? And could you tell if a game's going to be successful in the development process?
It sure would be nice if you could. we'd have a lot more successful studios if it was easy to tell. I think there are things that definitely give you signs about how your game is doing in development. Business and game development is really, really hard. So sometimes even if you do get some signals that things might not be successful, sometimes some companies just aren't in a position where they could change that, those aspects. So it's a very challenging industry. Games can take, like 5 years to make. And so, that's so much time and effort to sink into something. And like, you have to put a lot of time in before you can even show anything to anybody, so getting that feedback can come potentially too late in the process to really affect how you're going to be. To look for success in gaming, I think really, getting public feedback is really key. It was pretty shocking when we won second most anticipated game of the year. That came out of nowhere. But that's a great sign for us. We think that people are interested and care about it. So in particular with Queen City Chaos, I think the fact that it is trying to represent Regina. So the game is set in Regina, in a fictional version of it. But that's sort of a unique thing. Nobody really sees Canada show up in a lot of video games. It's pretty rare. So, a lot of Canadians are kind of interested to see that. but then it's also tapping into that retro game market. So I think that also has a lot of potential. So hopefully we're doing the right thing. Sadly, you never quite know. People can like a thing, but not necessarily want to spend money on it. So that's the real important thing when you're trying to make money at this, when you're trying to make a living and be a successful company. It's like, okay, people like us, but will they actually financially support us? That's the key. And that's very hard to tell.
Yeah. So based on your experience, do you see a lot of changes in the types of games that people are interested in over time? How do you explain that?
Yeah, I mean, the industry is always changing. So I went through the mobile boom. So I got, I started really getting involved in games in the 90s when, basically everything was on PC, and things were a lot more about strategy gaming was really the focus. 3D shooters came out, and then a big part of the market switched to that, but saw sort of the diversification of the market when more modern consoles started coming out, and we saw 3D games on console. That certainly changed the market a lot. But that was new technology, right? That's been a huge part of video games, is that constant improvement of graphics and what we can model and do as memory and processing increases on our consoles and computers. There's just so much more we can technically achieve. So there's always been that push. Now, what we've seen is that also there's been a lot of development in tools to develop video games. So it's really opened up the market. Early in video games, you had to be very technically skilled to be able to produce a video game. Like you just write out raw code or even assembly in the really old days, and it was just tremendously difficult to do. But in the last 10 years, maybe 15, 20 years even, there's been tools to help people make games, and that's really been key to allowing the indie scene to flourish. So independent developers of video games, thanks to programs like Unity, Game Maker Studio, people on their own can actually try making video games because there's that support from engines. So it's definitely democratized game making. A lot more people can get into it, and it's also meant that there's a lot more smaller video games. You don't have to be a big company staking your whole company's financial future on a product, right? There's just individuals trying to put out games. And I think really the interesting thing about that is that means when you have so many more people involved, you get a lot more different ideas. And so the beauty of it is we're finally seeing video games become an art form, that it doesn't just have to be a commercial product, but now people can tell